Hey girls, and welcome back to the In Between podcast. I am joined by Victoria Marcouillier today. I am so excited about this episode. It was so powerful. Victoria is an expert in branding. She builds websites for 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs, and she is really changing everything about the branding industry, in my opinion. She has made it trendy to be a mom in business, and she's really told her audience, you can be both. You can be a mom and you can be a business owner, and you can do all the things you want to do. Victoria has inspired me so much online. I followed her several months back when we had a mutual client who was getting a website done by her, and I have just fallen in love with the way that she runs her business. And this podcast episode just solidified all that for me because I just learned how much of a genuine person she is, and that branding can be fun. It doesn't have to be scary. The greatest insight from this episode is that if your website is not getting you leads, something might not be working. So join us for this episode. We're going to talk all about websites and how you can make your branding more powerful online. Welcome to the In Between podcast. I'm your host, Cassidy Owen, and I'm the founder of Cassidy Lynn Social, a social media management agency dedicated to helping brands find their authentic voice online. But more importantly, I'm someone who believes that the real magic happens in the messy middle, the in-between moments that shape who we become. Every week, I sit down with female founders, entrepreneurs, and incredible humans who are navigating growth, failure, and everything in between. So grab a nice coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome to the In Between podcast, Victoria. I'm super excited to have you here to give my audience context. My sweet client, Sarah, introduced me to Victoria and her brand, Brandwell. And I've been slowly obsessed. I tell all my friends, if you need branding or website advice, you need to follow their page. And so I'm really honored to have Victoria on the podcast today. Welcome to the In Between podcast.
Well, I am so honored to be on this show. This is exciting.
Yes. I would love to give some context for anyone who doesn't know you and your brand on what you do, who you work with, and how you even became an entrepreneur.
I'll start by answering that last question first, how I became an entrepreneur. I was one of those girls that I just always knew I would have my own thing. I was raised by entrepreneurial parents. My dad, as far back as I could remember, he owned his own business. It gave him a lot of flexibility. He worked his brains out, but he never missed a tennis match. He never missed a volleyball game. And I loved that. He was just always there when we needed him, even though he was building something really incredible. And then my mom, I would have called her a stay-at-home mom back then. And that's very much, what she is. But she also had an interior design business, and she just did it when we were at school. And, that was the money that funded our family vacations every year. And so very early on, I saw entrepreneurship modeled for me in a really positive light. And I just knew that I wanted that for myself. I wanted that flexibility. I wanted to choose which 100 hours a week I work, right? But then in terms of, more practically speaking, how I became the founder of Brandwell. So I did study advertising in college, and I really fell in love with consumer behavior and the psychology of why people buy things, and realizing that design and advertising and messaging can impact the way that we behave. And I ended up getting a job at a marketing agency, and I worked there for about 4 years. And a couple of years into that job, I had always been doing something on the side, whether it was like an eBay business. I had many little side hustles before I started Brandwell. But my husband came home from school. He was in PA school while I was working at this marketing agency. And he was like, hey, my buddy Pat needs a website. You know how to do that, right? Because at the company I worked for, I was actually the director of websites and online marketing. And we worked with a whole team of developers in India. And I got to learn a lot of really cool hard skills there. But when he presented this offer to me, I was like, well, yeah, I know how to do that. And I was like, would he pay me for it? And I just remember feeling so excited that somebody would pay me for this skill. And that was the very first website that I built for somebody who actually paid me for it. I had built quite a few for myself or for family members, but things hit differently when you get that first cha-ching, right? And I remember thinking okay, wait a second, this is a viable concept, right? One $300 website suddenly was a viable business idea in my mind. And so I came up with the name Brandwell. I started an LLC and I started freelancing. But I mentioned that my husband at the time was still in school. So I was the breadwinner of the home. And that was never the long-term goal. It was a short-term means to an end. And I was happy to do it. But I was very much looking forward to the day that we'd have a little bit more financial stability and I could take Brandwell and really turn it into something special. Because at this point, I was on the executive team at the marketing agency. I was traveling. I was working far more than 40 hours a week. So Brandwell got what was left of me. And actually, it's funny how the story played out, but my husband graduated. We had been talking about starting our family. And I found out on my birthday of all days that I was pregnant after quite a few months of
The
trying.
best
And
gift.
it was truly the best gift. I was so excited. And literally the first thought after I was like done thanking the Lord for answering our prayers and allowing us to get pregnant, my next thought was, oh my gosh, I'm quitting my job. Like this is my ticket out, right? And so my mom holds this over me to this day. My oldest is now 6, but I told my boss that I was pregnant before I even told my mom. I called him the next day and I put in my notice. I was like, listen, I'm having a baby. I just want to, be home with my kids. When that was like very much a half truth. I did want to have something of my own that allowed me to determine, who would be watching my kids throughout the day. Yeah, that felt like my ticket out because we had always said, my husband and I had always said that like someday when we start a family, if you want to work, great. If you don't want to work, like that's an option for you too, which is such a gift I now see. But I really wanted both. I wanted to continue, operating in what was not just a skill. It was like a major passion of mine. I love web design and marketing, but I knew like I wanted to be the type of mom that I had. My mom was so present. She never skipped a beat with us. And that was just what I had modeled for me and what I wanted to replicate for my own children. And so I ended up putting in my notice and it was there that I was like, okay, I have 9 months, maybe a little bit less, to see if I can really get this thing off the ground. Now, I had been freelancing for about a year and a half at this point, so I did have a viable business, but it was not going to match my salary before I left, right? So there was a building period, and that's actually how Brandwell started to take shape early on in terms of this whole all-female team in the creative agency direction. Because by the time I took it full time, I was already expecting a baby. And I knew like this business cannot live and die with me. I've got to figure out a way to grow it. So that was kind of the starting point of Brandwell.
That is one of my favorite stories. I've heard it over on your podcast. It's so inspiring because not that you were on a countdown by any means, but I can imagine the energy. You're pregnant, this huge change is coming. It was your first baby. I feel like that momentum almost built on top of your love for building Brandwell, and it really enhanced your abilities to push it forward.
Yeah, there's different motivators for everybody. A lot of times for entrepreneurs, it's a financial motivator. Like, all right, we have 6 months worth of capital before we start to go bankrupt or before we have to take out a loan. And then sometimes that's the motivating factor that gets their business off the ground. And for me, it was, I'm having a baby and I know that my priorities, my capacity are probably going to change significantly when this baby is here and I might not have the momentum in my favor, right? I really leveraged that. And I still think that I owe a lot of the success of Brandwell to just the timing of how everything played out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to talk about the nitty-gritty in it all. I'm sure there were a lot of mistakes made, a lot of ups and downs, especially shifting. I mean, at this point in my life, I don't have any kids. And so 24/7 is my business. I can't imagine being in your position where you've just quit your job, you've had these 9 months, and then your whole world switches with a baby and you have to really lean in to get help. You have to lean in to build people on your team that are going to help you because the time is just different in your day. Was that risky for you? Did you feel nervous? Did you feel scared? Or were you like, ready, let's hire, let's get a team on board?
Yeah, sure, it felt risky. I did go a very low risk way of hiring. I just started with contractors, which in the design business and the roles that I was hiring for, they weren't getting paid unless I was getting paid. So the biggest risk was more about like brand reputation, that I might bring somebody in who was misaligned with my brand. Early on, like your brand's reputation is so important. It always is, but nobody knows of you when you're first getting started. So that first impression and that first imprint on those first few customers is incredibly important. So I was very, very selective with whom I brought into my ethos, but fortunately that all worked out quite well. And I had some really good first hires. And I always tell people with hiring, yes, if you're going to hire a W-2 position, position and like you have to pay them this big salary no matter what. Like that's a risk. I've done that too. That was definitely scarier than hiring contractors. But that first one is the worst one. And once you do it, if you're strategic about whom you hire, your hire should always be driving more revenue for the business. Even if it's something that saves you time, that time saving is so that you can go and drive more revenue for the business, right? So once you live through at least one of those experiences where you hire and you see that, okay, like in my instance, I hired a white label designer. So when I was first starting out, I could take on about 3 websites a month by myself. But once I hired her, I was able to increase that to 5. So my revenue was able to jump significantly, almost, 30 to 40% with that first hire. And it's not always going to be that drastic in terms of revenue, but that mindset shift gave me a lot of confidence to then make the next hire and the next one. And then, before I knew it, I had like 8 girls on my team.
And you have developed a female-based clientele as well. Was that the initial goal for you? Like, did you have a passion for female entrepreneurs in the beginning? Or were you kind of like, I'm going to take everyone so I can get the money flowing?
Yeah, this is funny because no, I never had this vision of like Brandwell's going to be the go-to all-female branding and web design agency. I really just kept doing the next thing that felt right for the business. So, naturally, I was a female. My designs were rather feminine and I attracted other people like myself. So those first few clients were all females, minus the first one. His name was Pat. He was not a female. But those first few clients that, I was bringing in, they were women. I really enjoyed working with them. And when I started to hire, it was all just these girls that followed me on social media that were applying. And so, I hired a couple, and then really I had probably had 4 or 5 people on my team, all women, before this like light bulb moment went off for me, where I'll never forget. I remember sitting in a Starbucks years ago, and the Starbucks is still there. I go there all the time. But I remember sitting in a Starbucks and I had just gotten off a call with somebody inquiring to work with us. She was a midwife. And I remember asking her, as I still do to this day, I always say, how did you hear about Brandwell? How did you find us? And I just remember her saying like, well, I was looking for like a female owned and operated design agency because, I had previously worked with a larger scale agency and it just wasn't the experience I was after. And after that call, I hung up and I like went to my website and I was like, other than the brand images, which clearly show that my team are all female, I didn't have a single mention of the fact that we were like woman owned and operated. Like, and to be fair too, I know now that's like such a buzzword in the industry and like everybody is operating an all female team or it's all woman owned and operated. That really wasn't the case in like 2020, 2019 when I was really getting Brandwell off the ground. And so that was actually one of my firsthand experiences at brand positioning for my own business. I was like, wait a second, like I have this desirable thing within my business that my audience really wants. I need to leverage this. It's not like I need to do something new. I just need to leverage something that's already a strength of mine and really use that asset because a lot of people are looking for this, and I think it's a natural experience. I seek this out in a lot of vendors that I work with. It's a natural desire to want to work with people in similar seasons of life who really understand you. A lot of what has drawn people into Brandwell over the last 6 years has been my own journey of running the business whilst growing my family and having my babies. And I've been pretty open about that work-life balance and just the juggle of doing both and trying to do both well. And I make it very clear to my potential customers and to my clients that like, if you're a mom and you've got toddlers or a baby, like, I don't care if you breastfeed on our call. Like, I get it because I'm doing it too, I just think that there should be more of that. And I know for me, like, I feel so at ease doing, business with other vendors who are in similar stages of life because I don't feel any judgment for the fact that like, oh, I'm sorry, my toddler's running around in the background, or I'm sorry, you can hear Coco Melon on. Because that is just our reality, And so I really wanted to create like a space where that was normalized and it wasn't like frowned upon, and honestly go against the grain from what I saw a lot of other women owned and operated businesses doing at the time, which was just like, how quickly can we break the glass ceiling? How quickly can we compete with our male counterparts? And I was like, that's really not my goal. Like, that's great for, you guys, if that's your goal. But like, I want to have a regulated nervous system. I want to have happy employees. I want to be present with my kids. And I want to continue using this skill set that I believe God has given me that I know is transforming other women's businesses. Like that was really my goal. It still is 8 years later as I'm still running Brandwell. So I think just like being open and honest about that, even though I didn't even really see it, it took me about a year and a half to realize that that was a selling point for me. It was just this all-female team that I was building. And it was something that I found just by listening to my customers and asking them, why did you choose us?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important as well because it's allowing people, one, the feedback they're giving you, but also you and your team asking the question of like, who do we enjoy working with? Who do we like to be on calls with and have fun when we create these websites? I think that's something in my social agency that I've asked myself a lot in like the last 6 months to a year is like, what clients do I have the most fun creating content for? And I feel most creative and I feel like the strongest sense of self because those are the clients that I want to lean into and I want to find more of.
And those are the clients that are going to get the best results working with you too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important because in the early days, I get it. I remember being there like it was yesterday, but like you just want to say yes because you need to build your portfolio.
Oh,
You
yeah.
need cash in the bank. But when you say no to those misaligned clients, it typically comes at a cost to both parties because it's misaligned, because you're not creatively stimulated, because there's not as strong of like a relationship forming. There's the rapport is not as strong. They're not going to get the same results as somebody like you just mentioned. Like if you're really fired up about doing socials for this like really fun, creative, female-based agency, you're going to deliver higher quality work and that work is going to in turn get them better results, right? So that's just a good like word of advice to somebody in the early stages that the sooner you can establish who you serve and who you don't serve, the better you'll be able to position your business for more of that because your clients are your walking portfolio. I always will preach this, but like your clients are your walking portfolio and they're going to refer more people like themselves. So the sooner you learn to say no, the faster your portfolio will grow with the type of clients that you want in it. And then you start attracting more of those and it's an exponential ripple effect.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up because I was just going to ask when you started to narrow down and really focus on female owned businesses, was there a different marketing strategy behind that? Or it was like, oh, this naturally becomes easier because it works for both parties?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was like a different marketing strategy. It was just like, oh, I'm going to finally speak to the people I've already been speaking to, but I'm going to name it. I'm going to call it out. Because before, there's that fear of, well, I don't want to alienate anyone. I do work with men, right? Like if their brother wants us to design a website, I'll say yes, right? But now this is the advice that I give to a lot of people because they'll come to me with the same hesitations. I'll use the example of a gym owner that we designed a website for, and they were really catered to that like high performance athlete. And yet on the clarity call, they're like, well, but we still have, like the grandpas and like the 70 and 80-year-olds who come in for personal training. And I was like, listen, that's great. We love grandpa, but we're not going to dilute your brand's message for the 10%. We're going to build it for the 90%. And the 10% will likely still stay with you, right? Because they love you. There's a reason that they chose you, even though they're not in your target audience. Yeah. So why do we continually dilute our brand's message for the 10% when you actually speak to the people where it's going to resonate, you're going to get more and more of those. So wouldn't you rather work with 100% of aligned clientele, right? But you're afraid of doing that because of potentially losing out on 10%.
That's so good. And that's absolutely true, especially in the first couple of years of business, as you mentioned, when it's just like, oh, I have to take anything. I have to build up my roster, if you will, of clientele. And it's like when you actually start speaking to the people that you best serve, it comes back tenfold. Yeah. So let's hop into the marketing and the branding side, because I know that that's your zone of genius. What do you feel from an industry perspective, like people are getting right or getting wrong when it comes to their branding and their websites?
I think a lot of people confuse aesthetics with strategy. You probably see this from a social media standpoint too. We over prioritize the wrong things. One of which, in my opinion, is just jumping on trends on social media. How many hours are we spending trying to capitalize on a trend when you and I both know that going viral is not necessarily going to do anything for the bottom line of your business, right? And, we care so much about vanity metrics. We're so focused on being liked and not always as focused on being chosen. And this is really important. This is the work that we do at Brandwell is, the positioning work. You can have a fantastic social presence. You can be getting those likes all day long. And we're internalizing that as approval, right? Approval of our business, approval that we're doing things like. But if those people aren't converting, if they're not becoming customers of your business, then it's just a vanity metric. It's really not showing that you have a viable offer or something that, people are willing to spend money on. And so I would say that's one of the biggest problems is that we're over prioritizing the wrong things. And then we're under prioritizing the things that actually matter, things like first impressions. I know this because Cassidy, you just did a website audit with me recently. So you know that this is the advice that I give to people over and over and over again. But like when somebody lands on your website, their brain is deciding in a matter of seconds, is she trustworthy? Is this a legitimate business? Is this for me? That's a big one, right? Is this for me? Am I in the right place? And then is this worth the value? And the brain will have already decided the answer to those questions well before they ever get on a call with you. And so I see a lot of entrepreneurs who really do have phenomenal businesses and they have great infrastructure, great offers, but they've so under prioritized the first impression because they just don't think it matters. They're like, well, once I get them on the phone, I'm like, listen, girl, they're not getting on the phone because you lost them in the first 2 seconds. Right? So that's something that I see being under prioritized nowadays. And I think it's because it's not always that quick result, right? Like we can put together a post for social media in a few minutes and have it up and start getting that instant gratification. We can start seeing how it's responded to in seconds or minutes, where that's not going to necessarily be the same thing with a website. It's going to take weeks to design a strategic website and even longer if you're going to have strategic professional copywriting done. And then you have to get the website up and then you have to get traffic to it and drive visibility. So yes, it's a longer road to getting that approval, the signs of approval that we so crave, but it also has a longer ROI time span. So that's what I guess I wish I saw more entrepreneurs recognizing is that in 2026, we have a very skeptical consumer base, right? Because we've heard every marketing message. We've been burned at this point. This is especially true the higher ticket your offer. It's likely that your clients have made higher ticket investments before they've come to your business. And some of those probably didn't pan out. Some of those, they probably didn't get the results that were promised to them. So now they're skeptical, right? How are you any different? And people make decisions based off of perception, not reality. So even though you're different, you're going to give them a different experience than what maybe burned them before. If your online presence, social media included in all of this, but if your socials and your brand and your website are not answering those questions that I just shared, is this for me? Is this worth the value? Why should I choose this person? If it's not answering those right away, then it's going to drastically impact how that conversation unfolds, whether or not they book you. And even if they book you, this is another thing that I share with clients who are like, well, my business is all word of mouth referral. I'm like, listen, that's great. But you might have, a trusted word of mouth referral come in. They sign you because they really trust the referring person. But we all know what it's like to have a client who just doesn't trust us, right? Who questions everything, who over edits, right? Who all of a sudden it's like, wait, why did you hire me? Right? Like, why don't you create your own social post, right? Because you're tweaking everything that I do. And that lack of trust probably could be traced back to the moment they landed on your website, the moment where there was something off in your brand's positioning, in your brand's messaging that signaled like, I can't fully trust her. And that's why even when you have a word of mouth referral driven business, perception still matters because people are still deciding your value before they start working with you.
I love that. And I've seen that true in my business. I mean, I've been in business for 5 years and I'm just getting to the point where I'm like, oh, maybe I don't want to rely on referrals all the time, right? And especially as I change who I serve. But I love what you're saying about branding and website design because what I find in social is that exactly as you said. I can easily give you your instant gratification you want within a time span of 3 months on organic social media, but
Yeah.
you're not going to see actual growth for probably 6 months to a year. And if
Hmm.
you actually want it to convert, it has nothing to do with your social media. And
Yeah.
that's the hardest part for people to understand is I can do the best growth posts, education posts. I can make you look incredible online. And if they go to the next step, which naturally is usually the website,
Yeah.
and it's not doing its job, that's not my role. And sometimes I've had to have really hard conversations with people of, well, social's not working. And it's gotten to the point where now in strategy calls, I actually give them a list of things that I think they need to improve on outside of social. And 99% of the time, it has something to do with the website because it's just not doing the job that it needs to do to convert.
Yeah.
And the conversion is never going to happen on social, right?
Yeah.
They're always going to go somewhere else to validate what they're learning on social media.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can say that as a consumer myself, right? Like I went straight to your website after
Hmm.
I learned about you and learned what you were doing. And people don't want to hear that. What do you think is their resistance? Is it the timeline to making that step and getting a solid website done?
I think that's part of it. Budget, not fully understanding the ROI, something that we've had to shift about our sales process over the last year since we've gone into more of like a higher ticket offer than where we were before is actually showing them the ROI, like literally pulling up a calculator on the call and saying, what is one ideal client worth to you? And then doing the math for them. Okay, if we get you one lead per month, here's the ROI of this website design. Usually it's 10x what they're going to spend in the first year. And we've got case studies that back that up. But that's my responsibility as the business owner to help paint that picture for them because we don't know what we don't know, right? If they're on the phone with me, it's probably because their website doesn't work, right? They're not getting leads. So therefore they don't see it as a valuable asset for their business. And I have to help them understand how we're going to change that, right? Like, hey, I know your website's not doing anything for you now, but it actually should be the number one lead generating machine for your business. And just to reiterate what you said, I share the exact same kind of like human behavior pattern with my clients that in the service-based realm, a lot of times the businesses are run by referrals, which is great. Brandwell is largely run by referrals as well. But that doesn't negate our human nature to do our own research and due diligence. What do we do when we hear about somebody? We look them up on social. That is literally like the first thing that we do. That's where we go to vet. So if they go and they like what they see on social, now we're ready to get more information like you shared. Now we're on the website. The website should be the last step. The website should be where they're getting all of the answers to their questions. I always say, I think it's a headline on our website. Your website should seal the deal for people wanting to work with you, right? So they've already learned enough to know that they like you. Now, are you doing a good job presenting the value of the offers on your website where they actually want to take action? So if your business is struggling to get leads or you're getting some leads, but they're not converting, or we all know how bad it feels to, have the lead do the call, it goes really well. And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you're just out of my budget, right? Then something is broken in that ecosystem that we talked about. Either you don't have enough referring partners to your business, you should focus on upping your client experience so people can't help but want to share about you, or you have broken socials. You're either not active on social media at all, or you're not prioritizing, showing up as a credible industry leader. You're not sharing your expertise. You're not sharing the proof, the social proof of people who have gone before and made the decision and had good results, or your website is broken, right? One of those three things is probably out of alignment, because when all three things are in alignment, those are the brands that are unstoppable. Those are the brands that you're looking at and you're like, I want to emulate that, right? Because their businesses are recession proof. It doesn't matter if one referring partner falls off because there's a lot of different streams of leads and things that are supporting the longevity of the business. So it's all very important.
Yes, I completely agree. And my eyes were open to this a lot this year, and especially in consuming your content and really, like you mentioned, doing the research and understanding the importance of what a website can do for you.
Yeah.
Something I learned this year, and I'm sure you hear it all the time, are people in your industry specifically that maybe just use a template or have these easy ways where they build, I'm using that in quotations,
Mhm.
websites, but they actually do nothing and they don't move the needle in your business.
Yeah.
Can you explain to my audience the difference between your process, and I've not seen it firsthand, but I've seen it
Mhm.
almost secondhand from a client, your process and how that's different from maybe an agency that uses templates and you don't even know it and you're kind of just signing up because you
Yeah.
thought you were getting a great website?
Yeah. I'm glad that you asked this question because this process has actually changed a lot over the years. It looks very different in Brandwell year 8 than it did in Brandwell year 1. So
Mhm.
when we started Brandwell, it was really all about just building something beautiful so that there was a positive first impression. And that did have an ROI. It wasn't as significant as the ROI of what we do today. And I think every entrepreneur at some point gets to this point where you stop selling them what they want and you start giving them what they need. Or you can sell them what they want, but you have to give them what they need or they're going to regret the investment, right? And so all people wanted when they came to Brandwell in those early years was a pretty website, right?
Mm.
Well, why should they pay me 10 times the cost of a template when they could just go get a pretty website from a template shop? That's a really valid question, right? And sometimes I was like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know why. I didn't even know how to answer it myself. However, that really shifted. I think it was like 2022 when I personally got really invested into brand positioning and understanding how positioning really allowed you to cut through the quote unquote noise that we all talk about, right? As a lot of industries started getting more and more saturated over the last 5 years, med spas, interior designers, graphic designers, social media marketers, like the barrier to entry has just been so low to start a business. So like everyone's doing it. You know, the post-COVID online world is so different. A lot of people lost their jobs and use that as the launching pad to start their own thing. And so what happened is just started creating a lot of noise. That's when I think there was a very real shift in the way that people went about making buying decisions. Everyone started to look and sound the exact same. This is actually happening again right now with AI, and maybe we'll touch on that in a little bit.
Yes.
But when everybody looks and sounds the same, options feel endless, right? And that can create a lot of overwhelm. So, what do people do when they're overwhelmed? They don't buy, or they buy the most convenient or the cheapest option. So, if your brand doesn't want to be labeled as the most convenient or the cheapest, then we have to figure out a way to position ourselves as different from all the other people that are offering the same thing that we have to offer. Because a lot of people just assume that people know how you're different. They don't. I promise you, they don't, because we're consuming content in a matter of seconds. And we're not remembering everything that you share in your social post, right? We're not going back to it to try and research. Like, that is not the job of the buyer to do all of this research. That is the job of the brand to help somebody understand in a matter of seconds how you are different. What is your unique brand positioning? And why does that matter to the person? Why should they not only choose you, but pay more for you, right? So, all of that to say, I got really drawn into understanding brand positioning. I started using it in my own business and I was able to continually raise my rates year after year after year. And it really didn't affect the business. It was amazing. And I was like, I don't think my clients understand this. I don't think that they understand the need to be carefully and strategically positioned in their market before we design the brand and the website. And so that's when I got my team together. We actually all flew in. I have team members all over the country, but we got together for a Brandwell retreat and we started talking about how can we layer in more strategy for our clients? How can we help them figure out their brand positioning? We had a questionnaire, early on in Brandwell that our clients would have to fill out before we started the design work. And one of the questions was really simple, but why should somebody choose you over your competition? And like probably 70% of our clients left it blank or just said, I don't know. And so that was actually the catalyst for me to create the Branding Business School, which is my brand strategy course. And that was what eventually turned into the Branding Business School podcast as well. But I was like, this is a huge problem. All of these female founders have phenomenal businesses, but they can't even articulate why somebody should choose them over their competition. So if you're not that convicted in your own differentiators, your clients certainly won't be, right? And so that was when my passion for what I do really expanded into, yes, I want to design you something gorgeous that turns heads and makes people actually want to stick around to see what the business is all about. But I want to make sure that there's depth, right? We don't want to just keep putting lipstick on a pig. We want to sit down with you and we want to figure out what are your differentiators? Why are you better? So we do that with every single client now, whether they're just doing branding with us or whether they're doing a website with us. We walk them through our proprietary process called Prep Well that we developed at that retreat. We sat down and we, put all of our heads together and we developed this process called Prep Well. And then we actually give every single client of ours complimentary access into the branding business school so that it comes down to mindset and understanding branding from a more holistic perspective. Because still, a lot of our clients come to us thinking that they just need the visuals. And it's our job to say, yes, we're going to give you the visuals, but you also need this if you want to truly see results. So we're going to give you this too, even though you didn't ask for it. So that's kind of how our process evolved over the years. And the result of that evolution has been phenomenal ROI for our clients. It used to just be, oh, I launched with Brandwell and I'm so confident and I'm promoting my business, which is great. And we want that emotional side of it too. But now, we're getting these case study forms and they're like, I generated an extra 100K in revenue in the first year post-launch. Like that's the power of strategic brand positioning before you design.
I love that. Again, I've seen it real time in my client Sarah. Like we started together and she was serving women in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she was already trying to do that before. And then I noticed when she started working with you guys specifically, I would get these emails of like, now we're serving this person and now we're serving this person. And it was all the same person, but it was at such a tighter description and tighter level. And then that's really when we started having all this traction on socials for her, is like she became so specifically clear on this one person she was serving, right?
Yeah.
And it all stemmed from your Prep Well, obviously asking bigger, but also more refined questions at the same time.
Yeah. Premium positioning and high-end branding, it's not about using gold in your color palette or cursive fonts and stuff. It is about being understood instantly by the people that you're trying to serve. That you feel like the obvious choice for a very specific group of people, because that is what allows people to convert so much faster and get such better results than constantly trying to speak to everybody and having to get on all these calls only for it to not pan out. You're spinning your wheels in so many ways where it's like, if you understand how this will actually benefit your business, from shorter sales cycles to better fit clientele, it allows everything in the business to rise.
Absolutely. So I want to chat a little bit about how you personally in your business utilize social media and if it is at all a discussion within your clientele. And you have grown quite the incredible following of, I would say, people who, as myself would call a cult follower, of people who just really love and adore Brandwell and everything that you do. How has social media played a piece in your business over the last 8 years?
Social media has been invaluable to Brandwell over the years. It's amazing because I can't say I've ever had great strategy behind it. Now we're really starting to step up the game here, but I've done a little bit of everything when it comes to social media. We did like post every day in the early days of Brandwell. We, hopped on, was it like 2020, 2021, where everybody was dancing and doing reels? I had my team dancing to, Walker Hayes, Fancy Leg. We've done everything. Now I would say our social strategy has really shifted where the goal is, I really look at every piece of content through the lens of a prospective buyer of Brandwell. Would this make somebody want to work with us? Doesn't mean it's all thought leadership content or just like continuing to give brand advice. Like a lot of that is on a personality fit. Like, does this showcase our personalities in a way where people are like, oh my gosh, I want to work with them, right? On a relatability level. I mentioned earlier, how I wanted to kind of go against the grain of what I saw a lot of other female founders doing, where I felt like there was this push to like, how edgy can we be? And like, can we cuss in our content and all of that? And like, that works for their target audience. But for me, I was like, that's just not me, right? I'm not edgy. I'm a mom of 3 kids. And like, I want that to show because it's a differentiator, right? So for somebody who's not looking for that like edgy, cool girl vibe, and they're looking for just something a little bit more approachable, a little bit more relatable, like Brandwell's going to stand out to them. So really like, that's probably about as high level as our strategy has gone with social media, is looking at every post through the lens of a prospective buyer and saying, would this make them want to work with Brandwell on one of these levels? Does it establish us as an authority in our space? Does it show our personality? personality? Does it show the proof of what happens when you work with us? Like, are we giving the context of the results that they're going to get? Are we showing outcomes? I think that's like really, really important, and that's working for us. But, overall, like, here's just to show you how I know that social media has been incredibly beneficial to my business over the years. We lost our social media manager in April of 2025. It was a very like mutual, she was just moving on to bigger and better things, and we were really happy for her. And at the time, our team was quite robust anyways, and I was like, let's just pull it in-house. Like, we don't really need to replace this position at the moment. I was getting ready to have my third baby, and I was just like, I can't hire and train somebody right now. So let's just pull this in-house. And so that's always a good idea at first, but it's like all the people on my team already had their jobs, and to add it on, it was just always an afterthought. And so we went quite a few months, I would say from May to December, really showing up rather sporadically. We had always been consistent 3 to 5 times a week. You could expect to see Brandwell on your feed. And then that changed. And now it was like maybe once a week were we showing up. And so initially, didn't really see any change in numbers, right? Revenue still looked the same. But about 4 months later from when we had stopped showing up, we realized that like, wow, leads are down all of a sudden. And then the next one, leads are still down. Like, what's going on? And so we had to zoom out and really look at, okay, what all has changed? And we were able to kind of dial in and say, you know what, even though we weren't necessarily attributing all of these leads to social media, it was part of their buying process, because whether they said they found us through Instagram or they found us through a referral, they were going there, right? And then that was convincing them to take the next step, which was to go to our website. And so that piece is missing, and therefore we're getting fewer leads. So that was when I actually was like, okay, we're getting this back in right now. We are hiring a digital marketing strategist, and I onboarded a new one in January, and she's doing a wonderful job. And what do you know? 3 months after showing up more consistently on social media again, leads are up. So it's a very important component of the buying decision process for most millennials, Gen Zers. So if you're serving that audience, like, I would say it's a non-negotiable.
I always tell potential clients when we're talking about it, I'm like, do you remember when websites first became huge? And it was like, if you didn't have a website, people were like, like, are you a legit business?
Yeah.
I feel that way about social media and websites together now. Because
absolutely.
if you just have socials and it's a business and there's nowhere for them to go, they feel lost. They don't trust you because they're like, well, it's just social media. But if you just have a website and they can't go stalk you on socials, they're also like, okay, I need to know more information. Not that it can't work. I mean, obviously there's businesses that are the exception, but I find that, yeah, you do really need both to see results and effects along the whole long term of the situation. And I also think it's really important what you said of your strategy now is to focus on the people that you're selling to and that you serve to. Mm-hmm. That's what I find when I usually start working with people on social media is they're trying to talk to everyone. They're trying to do the TikTok dances because everyone else is doing it. And it's like, okay, is that TikTok dance selling to who you actually want to sell to, if that's your higher ticket offer or whoever that is? And I think the clients that I've had the most success in running their socials have a lot of clarity on who they're trying to sell to, and they're perfectly okay not doing all the things to attract all the people. And that's why you have a lot of social agencies that show case studies of like, okay, this client has 600 followers and grew her business by this much, and she's got 650 followers now, right? Like, it has nothing to do with those vanity metrics, because if your marketing is doing the right job and you're using social to serve the right people and the website's doing the right job, it's kind of an easy sell.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just made things a 2-step process instead of a 1-step process. We used to just go to the website, and social media has changed branding forever. I mean, it has brought so much humanity to brands. It's really why brand positioning is so important, because when these big brands that otherwise they were boiled down to a logo, right, or a symbol, let's take the example of like Nike or something, right? Like, they recognize the importance of that human to human connection, the importance of relatability. And so that's why they sponsor athletes who are on social media, who are bringing a personality and an emotional component to what their brand is known for. And that's what I think the role of social media is for a lot of our businesses as service providers is like, yes, you have your brand's positioning in terms of, who you serve, the differentiators within your offer suite, But then there's also you. Like nobody is you. So
Yep.
what's the fastest way to help people understand you? If you don't have a podcast, right? You can't expect somebody to go and read your about page on your website. Like social media is this
Mhm.
low-hanging fruit to really get in front of your audience and just show them you, because that's a huge differentiator for every brand. That's definitely how we use it too. I've been hopping on stories for 8 years now on Brandwell, just showing my life and my values and what's important to me. And in turn, that creates a lot of trust and even just likability. Likability is important when, again, options are endless these days. They're going to go with who they like and who they trust. And I think social media is one of the strongest and fastest ways to build those two things.
And stories, especially, are the easiest way to build trust under any circumstance. Because let's use this example of our interactions, because we've been interacting for probably a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
I knew when I was going to get on the call, it was like a friend I've known because I've been watching your stories, right?
Yeah.
I've been consistently consuming your content, that when I got on this call, I knew who to expect.
Right.
Assuming all things are the same. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that is so valuable, at least for me personally, because as someone who might overthink or be like, oh, like, what is this interaction going to be like?
Right.
I got on the call this morning and I'm like, oh, I already know a little bit about Victoria.
Yes.
I've already watched her stories. I know she has beautiful babies and this is her these are her values and her business, right? And so there's a huge advantage to that, even as you're building a business.
Yeah.
I want
Absolutely.
to ask you a little bit, of course, about the in-between.
Yeah.
And there have been so many gaps, and I'm sure even some that you haven't shared personally. How do you handle gaps between where you are and where you are meant to be or where you want to go in your business and your personal life?
I feel like it's all the in between, right?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you get where you want to go, the goalpost changes and now you're on to the next thing. So life is lived in the in between. And that's why I loved when you pitched this idea of me coming on your show and I learned a little bit about what the podcast was all about. I was like, yes, this is very aligned with just the way that I view life and business and everything. So yeah, it's all been an in between, from like the vision of Brandwell to where I am today. I mean, gosh, these last 8 years, particularly the last 6, from having my first baby and then having 2 more, and really Brandwell being like this rocket ship that was just taking off amidst all of it. Looking back, I don't know that I ever would have planned my life to happen this way, where the business and the family would start and grow at the exact same time, because it's been incredibly challenging. But also that's like been so empowering, because you learn your capacity, you just learn what you're capable of doing that you otherwise would just never would have even put yourself up to it in the first place. And I know you and I have both done a High Rocks, and that was like another reason I like instantly just felt like you were a kindred, because I love High Rocks. I just did my second one. I think there are a lot of parallels with like training in the gym, training for an event, and entrepreneurship. And so, as I was thinking about coming on your show today and knowing we both had done a High Rocks, I was like, this is probably a good analogy to share. Maybe some of your listeners are into fitness or you run marathons or whatever it may be, but we all want that like race day moment, right? We all want that race day high. And as it relates to business, we all want the 6-figure years. We want the 6-figure months, whatever the goalpost is for you. We want it as fast as we can get it, right? But it is in the in-between. It is in the training that we're even developing the capacity to handle it when we get there. And I think that's really important, because for me, like the business that I'm operating today, I could not have operated 4 years ago. I could not have even operated it 3 years ago. Every year, I am learning so much, even about like emotional regulation, right? Like the stakes are just higher. When your business scales and grows and your offer suites are worth more and you're working with higher profile clientele, like the stakes are higher and everything is amplified in the business, the good and the bad. And so 2026 Victoria can handle a whole lot more than me the first year after I had my first baby, right? So recognizing that the in-between is where you're not just like building the systems, building the business, hiring the team, but you're really developing the capacity for what's coming next. And in the example of High Rocks, like I just did this last one, 2 weekends ago with my partner, and like we posted a time that I was really proud of. We did it in an hour and 10 minutes, which was like a 13-minute PR from what we did last year. But like we fought for that. And I was thinking like that was only possible from every day at the gym, every workout that wasn't being clapped for, every workout that I didn't post on social media, just the consistency of showing up day after day, putting in the work, even when the workouts felt crappy or didn't feel super productive, right? That is what gave my body the capacity to push as hard as I did and to have that race day high where I got up there and I was so proud of what we were able to do. And I think that that's a really important lesson for entrepreneurs. We follow all these people on social media and, we have this standard of what success should look like and how soon we should reach these levels of growth. But just know that like, if you're not where you want to be yet, like you are still developing capacity to handle it when you get there. I'm so thankful that my business didn't grow any faster than it did because it gets hard, and I think that the in-between is what allows you to handle the hard. So it's a very important phase.
Well, I love that you used kindred spirits because the whole reason I started this podcast is based off of a fitness event and exactly what you're saying. I ran a marathon, 2 or 3 years ago. As I was running it actually on race day, I was thinking, man, the race is kind of the easy part. Like signing up is the easy part. And then the race day, and as an athlete, like the adrenaline and you're just so pumped. It's like, not that it's easy by any means, but mentally it's really like, I just have to get to that finish line. But there were days where I was running 21 miles and like I would be running and crying sometimes and thinking to myself, like, if I just gave up right now, no one would know. It would just be me and my ego, and I wouldn't let myself do it.
Yeah.
And that's truly what inspired me to be like, why? I think, especially as women, what gets us through that in-between moment of showing up to those workouts, showing up to our business and putting in the hours. That's what motivated me to end up starting the podcast because I was so curious. And I think it's different for everyone. Like you mentioned in the beginning of the episode, like your big driver was your family and your kiddos and how you were raised in mimicking that. That driver can be different for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think those moments, and again, we're always in a certain in-between in our life, really decide the grit to keep going, to keep learning, to keep developing. And then, we get to race day and it's like, oh my gosh, we did this huge thing. But that day is not necessarily the growth. It's everything in between that decides the growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. The race day moment, the high revenue month, the sold out offer, like that is just a blip on the radar because that euphoria will end as soon as it came. And, most people want to skip the part where you actually prepare for that moment, but that's really where life is lived. I've heard it said, and I've been leaning into this idea a lot this past year because I've just been through a lot this year. Ever since having my third, it's just been like one thing after the next, even with business and stuff. And just recognizing that like entrepreneurship is a test of your tolerance. How much can you tolerate? And the ones who can tolerate the most will go the furthest because we all come up against these challenges. We all face resistance. And a lot of people, that's when they just say, no, I'm not interested anymore. Like this is no longer fun for me, right? We got into it because we thought it was going to be fun and we were pitched a very different story than what we actually are living and experiencing. So it has to be about more than that. And for me, it's become so much more even about like personal development and spiritual development. I feel like I've grown so much as a mother and a wife, even more so than I have as a business owner through what my business has taught me, right? Like my boundaries are so much stronger now. My priorities are so clear. There are certain things that I might have like fudged on a little bit in the early years for the sake of a sale. And now I'm just like, nope, because I know what that will do to my peace and it's simply not worth it. And that conviction allows you to truly build a better business, to be a better leader for your team, to give your clients actually better service because you're honoring those boundaries and the conviction. And so the in-between is incredibly necessary. It's where 95% of your life and your career are going to unfold. And then we get those little highs, we get those race day moments to keep us going and to remind us why we do it. But those mountaintops are not typically where we're learning and we're growing.
Well, Victoria, I am so, so grateful for your whole brand, everything you've built. And I know it comes straight from your heart. Now meeting you and actually having a conversation one-on-one, I can say that. I am beyond grateful for you. I've heard Sarah Blakely often say that she has mentors of people who don't even know she exists. And I count you as one of those for me. And I'm lucky that now we know each other because you've truly built something that beyond any successes, you can tell that people are happy and they come away from what you build better versions of themselves with more clarity and confidence. And not every quote unquote marketing, branding, branding, whatever you want to call it, agency can say the same. So I hope that you're very proud of what you've created. And I'm beyond grateful to know you and get to watch what you build every single day. So thank you so much for joining me today. It really means a lot.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to have a new podcast in my library now with the In Between podcast. This has just been great.
And I highly recommend you listen to Victoria's. It's been one of my favorites to binge. When is the new season coming out, actually?
The new season is going to start at the beginning of May, and we have truly some incredible guests coming on this season. So it's going to be a good one.
Okay, good. I think especially if you're a female entrepreneur, which is most of my listeners as well, you will learn so much. I love your guest episodes. There's just a lot of good nuggets in there. So make sure you check that out. And we will leave all Victoria's information in the show notes. So I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll catch you later. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope this conversation gave you exactly what you needed to hear, whether that's permission to slow down, motivation to keep going, or just a reminder that you're not alone in the in-between moments. Now, if you're a female founder or a value-driven brand looking to build meaningful connections on social media, I'd love to work with you. At Cassidy Lynn Social, we help brands express their authentic voice through strategy-driven social media management. Head to CassidyLynnSocial.com to learn more about how we can work together. And if you've loved this episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Screenshot it and tag me on Instagram at Cassidy Lynn Social. And if you're going through your own in-between moment right now, keep showing up. The growth is happening even when you can't see it. I'll see you next week for another in-between conversation.